You know the expression, death and taxes are the two absolutes in life. I suppose clean laundry is somewhere on that short list too. Sure, you can walk around in filthy clothes, looking and feeling dirty, being all smelly, but who wants that? As for those taxes, ugh. Unless you're a tax attorney, I can't see anyone getting excited to discuss that topic. And presumably most people aren't dying to die. Let's hope. Oh, but two other inevitabilities in life are, of course, eating and drinking. And who doesn't find some comfort in a nice hot beverage? It's a good thing we have a sponsor so we can offer you a premium option of just that. And that sponsor is Sparkplug Coffee. You want fresh, fairly traded Arabica beans? They've got them. Did I say premium? They're that too. And these are the freshest in Canada. Speaking of this country, people who live here get their orders shipped for free. Both us great white northerners and Americans too will get what they buy within a week. I'm afraid, though, that international listeners are going to have to find their coffee fulfillment elsewhere. But the fulfillment of us North Americans can include a bag of decaf or half-calf. In that package can be an assortment of blends and roasts, including rotating seasonal blends. Or just stick with your favorite. You don't have to enter different universes and change it up if you don't want to. Although that might be fun and terrifying. Thing on your head there, googly eye. Membership gets you quite a few privileges, including that you get perks and deals that non-members don't, and you save money on every order when you're a member. Sparkplug allows you to cancel or pause any time if your life has gone haywire or something. You can also customize get your orders when it suits you, so don't be thinking of this as some run-of-the-mill Coffee of the Month club. Sparkplug.coffee/HYES is what you need to be putting in your browser and start shopping. You'll save 20% off your next order if you use that HYES promo code. So that was 90 seconds to 2 minutes worth of advertising. It's now time for us to start deconstructing this week's movie. Andrew Luther, you can help play us into this thing by striking up your keyboard. Tell him, Bev.
And action. Have you ever seen
everything, everywhere, all at once? Good day, movie fans, and thank you for joining us for the 525th edition of our Classic Movies podcast. We usually go back into the past and review movies made long ago, but today we're only going back about a year to see how we feel about the Daniels' big Oscar winner, and we'll be spoiling it from cover to cover. I'm the frazzled verse jumper who knows that sometimes you gotta listen to your spouse and kill him with kindness, Ryan Ellis. And here's the lady who hears voices and has been saying for years that failure makes a person stronger, my wife Bev.
That's me.
Do you really feel that way? I put that on you, didn't I?
Well, I definitely agree with the kill him with kindness strategy.
You have said that.
Yeah, it works. It works most of the time.
Some of the time.
But you don't. I said kindness, not passive aggression.
Yeah, fair enough. We're going to talk about kind people when we get to the Oscars section very soon. But first, the coming attractions trivia question, which is about the Oscars, because as regular listeners know, I'm an Oscars guy, so I'll go to that well once again. The Daniels, Scheinert and Quan, were the fifth pair of collaborators to get nominated for the Best Director Oscar, and the third pair to win. Which was the only duo to get nominated twice?
It's the Coens. It has to be.
It is the Coens.
For Fargo and No Country?
You're right about the Coens, but not those movies.
Oh, what? Really?
No Country, they won for that, of course. They won 3 Oscars like the Daniels did in this situation, in this movie.
They didn't get a directing nomination for Fargo?
It was just Joel.
Oh, right. So what is the other one? Serious Man?
True Grit.
True Grit.
The Serious Man was Best Picture only, not Best Director.
Oh, damn.
They could have 4 right there then, because The Serious Man, I didn't love it. I do want to see that again. Maybe we'll cover it next year when it's 15 years old.
It's a movie I've struggled with, but I find so compelling, but I don't get it.
Right, but a director nom would have been appropriate when it gets a Best Picture nom. So that could have been 3 times. And if they had been billed as they should have been all along, it would have been 4, because Fargo, which should have won Best Picture and all the other awards that year, not just Screenplay and Best Actress, would be a 4th time. But it is just 2, True Grit and No Country, for these guys. And it's also interesting to think, the thing they share, the Coens and now the Daniels, is surrealism. Because the Coens have had plenty of movies that are just flat out real. No Country, the one they won the Oscar for. There's nothing really surreal in that. It's a pretty straightforward story. And Fargo is also that, but Raising Arizona has some sci-fi-ish elements and weird elements, and obviously A Serious Man gets into all kinds of biblical stuff. A lot of their movies have been surreal and weird. So I guess they're connected in that way too. Okay, so Crazy Poor Asians was released by...
Well done.
I was going to go with Bubbles, because apparently, according to Daniel Scheinert, that was the original title of this movie, the working title, because of all the universes, the Bubbles. But I was coming downstairs from the washroom when I was prepping for this about 3-4 hours ago and thought, crazy poor Asians. Just
Amazing. Quan said he got back into acting because of the success of Crazy Rich Asians.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Crazy Poor Asians was released by A24 and also some independent production companies in late March and early April 2022. The film stayed in theaters forever and ended up grossing 10 times its budget worldwide. Bev, the movie is so old. A year and a half, not even a year and a half. But please remind us what it's about. Give us a skinny on everything, everywhere, all at EEAAO once.
Michelle Yeoh is Evelyn Wang, a Chinese-American running a laundromat with her husband Waymond. While sorting through an audit, Evelyn is suddenly confronted by interdimensional travelers seeking her to help conquer Jobu Tupaki, a supervillain with the ability to travel between parallel universes who seeks to destroy everything in order to destroy herself. Oh, and she also happens to be Evelyn's daughter from another universe. Evelyn must learn to navigate the multiverse to gain the skills and insight to defeat Jobu Tupaki without hurting her daughter.
That is truly missing a lot of big points.
Well,
but you got summarized.
What do you want?
Oh, I'm not criticizing you. I couldn't have done much better myself.
We'll get into it as best we can, but there's no way we're going to be able to hit all of the plot points and all the different universes. It's so dense.
Well, in a nutshell, I have 3 of them. Number 1, being in nothingness. Because, of course, nothing matters. That is Jobu Tupaki's theory. Or, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. Ferris Bueller. Or, and fans of Major League will get this one, fuck you, Jobu.
All right, fans of Major League, I hope you enjoyed that.
Pedro Serrano, his idol is Jobu. I stick up for you. I good to you. You know help me now? I say, fuck you, Jobu. I do it myself. Well, here we get a Jobu. And apparently the guys picked Jobu Tupaki because it didn't make sense. It's
like a nonsense word.
Words, I guess.
Yeah, Daniel Quan said it came to him in a dream when him and his wife were trying to figure out a name for their kid. And it was like a nonsense grouping of letters.
Let's talk about the raves from the critics and the Oscars and the box office and all that stuff. And I did watch the Oscar speeches, all 7 of them, last night, so I've got some notes about that specifically. Rotten Tomatoes, 93% of the critics out there like this film. 8.5 out of 10 is the average. There are 395 reviews on the site, and 86% of audiences. It was 25th last year at the box office. Top Gun Maverick was, of course, number 1. Avatar 2 was number 2, and Nope, maybe we'll cover that at some point, we probably will, was 14th. It won the 7 Oscars. Best Picture, Best Directors, I guess. Michelle Yeoh for Best Actress. Ke Quan for Best Supporting Actor. Jamie Lee Curtis for Best Supporting Actress. The first time in a long time 3 people from the same movie won acting Oscars. The Daniels won Original Screenplay. Paul Rogers' editing was the 7th award. And it was nominated for 4 more. Stephanie Hsu, so H-S-U, but pronounced Hsu, for Best Supporting Actress. The costumes, Son Lux's music score, and the song, This Is a Life. Was that an end credits song?
I don't know. They do use some pop songs throughout. I think Mitski is the artist. This Is a Life.
David Byrne's involved. Because at the Oscars, he had the sausage finger, the hot dog fingers at the Oscars.
That's right. Don't they play it when Joy is driving away in her car at some point?
Okay, so I just mentioned I watched the speeches. I'll go through this right now. I won't dwell on these too much. But Ke Quan was the first one of the 7. Ariana DeBose and Troy Kotzer, who won Supporting Actress and Supporting Actor the year before, presented together. They did Supporting Actor and Supporting Actress, I think, at the same time. So DeBose, by the way, wipes away tears when Ke Quan comes up there after he's won. We all knew he was going to. He was the lock this year. I always said I shouldn't say locks anymore after Stallone in Creed, because I thought that was a lock. But sometimes there really are locks, and he was for this movie. There were some good candidates up against him. And I didn't remember how good he was in this, because I was hearing through the end of last year, we'd seen the movie months before, and I liked it so much, of course. But I don't remember him being such an important part of this. Not a lead character, so it's not one of those, he's really the other lead, but supporting actor. No, he is a supporting player, but he's great in this, and I was so glad to see him win beyond the whole comeback story, which, of course, is the big thing here. Another good speech. The Golden Globe speech was maybe even better. He attributed Spielberg and the Golden Globes. He blew kisses at him at the Oscar speech. That was really great. And he got a standing ovation, which is something you see so often now. I commented on this recently, I think a show I did by myself, where Best Picture happened. It was Braveheart. And no standing O. And you could say, well, they don't like Mel Gibson. Nobody knew Mel Gibson was like that back then.
Back then, everybody loved him.
Best Picture now, for many years, always gets a standing ovation. It doesn't matter if the movie really is worthy or not. But most of the time, it seems, the actors do too, whether they were the number 1 choice for people or not. And he got a standing ovation. Very teary speech. Very good. Jamie Lee Curtis. This is one of my favorite speeches ever. I said it when we talked about it. We did, of course, the Oscars preview and post-view. So we talked about this movie already in a way a couple months ago. But you could see her saying, "Shut up," when her name is called by DuBose. And of course, we know Angela Bassett was not happy because she didn't win, although Bassett's getting an honorary award later this year.
They were afraid of her. No, not afraid. I shouldn't say that. I would be afraid of disappointing her. Come on. Doesn't she just give that energy?
I will say what I've said
I'm so very sorry. I'm so very sorry.
But I will say what I've said before. Sometimes the honorary award means more because it's saying you've been around a long time and done great stuff for decades.
Who beat her for the Best Actress Oscar
Holly Hunter.
when she should have won
Holly Hunter for Piano.
Two wonderful performances because she should have won for What's Love Got to Do With It.
I would have picked her too.
That was like absolutely her best performance. Killed it, and I'm sorry. Black Panther, I'm not saying she's not great in that movie, but come on. That's the movie she wins an Oscar for?
And I said in the Oscars preview probably, and maybe the post view, that I think Hong Chow from The Whale. We didn't love The Whale, but I loved her work in that. And even now seeing this movie a second time, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Stephanie Hsu.
Yeah.
Jamie Lee Curtis, this is mostly, let's face it, a career award. She's very good in the movie.
Yeah.
It's so different for her. But Stephanie Hsu, a newcomer, hasn't been around that long, might be even better. And she's certainly more important to the story than Curtis is, although I guess Curtis is supporting. So Bassett is mad. Carrie Condon even seems annoyed. She was up for Banshees of Inisherin. Another good choice. Maybe my second favorite choice of all of them. Well, actually, maybe now I'd say...
I loved her performance.
I'd maybe say Hsu. Maybe the two Asian people were my first two choices. They're all good candidates. I don't think anybody was a bad candidate. But I loved Curtis's speech for this reason. She kept saying things like, "We just won an Oscar," talking about the crew. She mentioned her fans, the genre fans, obviously referencing Halloween especially.
Yes, I forgot about that. I loved that.
How many times, I've talked about this before, do actors or anybody talk about the people that make their movies happen because they go to see them?
And acknowledge that she came up in horror. She's not trying to say it's an embarrassing thing in her past and look how far she's come. She's like, those movies were great and the fans were right to love them and I'm happy I made them. I'm proud of that part of my career. I loved that because Everything Everywhere All at Once is a genre film and she is playing like a very out there character that would never normally win an Oscar, but this movie defied the odds in about a zillion different ways.
Yeah. And she thanked, of course, the crew and the cast and all that, and the Daniels. She did all those things you always do. But then she saved her parents for last. So Jamie Lee Curtis's parents, as people maybe know, maybe they don't, Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh. They were nominated, as she points out. They never won before. And then she says, because it had always been, we won an Oscar. That was a great thing that she kept on saying we about the crew and the other cast members and the fans. But then, Mom and Dad, I just won an Oscar. And then she really breaks up. Michelle Yeoh was very good when she won for Best Actress. Her three co-stars gave her a big group hug. She talked about how you're not past your prime, even in your 60s. And you look at her and think, wait, I know she is, but she's in her 60s?
It's mind-blowing.
She looks younger than me. I'm 49. They cut to Stephanie Hsu. She's crying. I knew this was true, but seeing this again really proved it to me, really brought it out. Just how happy, of course, all of them were for each other, but so was the whole crowd. It was the Parasite thing all over again.
Yes.
Everyone seemed to be happy that this movie won. Yeah. This movie got all the big responses when they were, especially Quan, when they showed their faces or when they were up for the award. Spielberg seemed like he was legit happy. He wasn't when Shakespeare in Love won in 1998, and Harrison Ford presented Best Picture that night, too. The screenplay won. Daniel Scheinert thanked his teachers. The first thing he talked about was his teachers. That was really cool. Daniel Quan talked about the imposter syndrome. He has self-esteem issues.
Yeah. At some point, they wanted to make the lead character somebody who discovers as an adult that they had ADHD. And then while he was developing the script and doing the research, he's like, wait a minute. This all sounds really familiar. And then he sought out a diagnosis and discovered that he had ADHD.
So their writing, directing, and even the Best Picture speech, and the actors too that won, were so much about the inclusion notion. They didn't really go on about that too much, but it's the notion that love yourself, you all matter, which was great. Oh, I skipped over Paul Rogers, who won for Best Editor. You called him a
smoke show? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh my God. No one should have all these things. No one should be this talented and this lucky and
his
this
second
gorgeous.
Movie, as he points out.
Unbelievable. All these edits could so easily give you a headache, and there are parts of it that feel a little overwhelming, but it all serves the plot, the theme, and like what's actually happening in the film. It makes so much sense. To keep this breakneck pace and keep it watchable, there's so many ways this could be sloppy, and you see people doing poor copies of this style of really fast cut all the time. It's an immaculate job. This man has a real gift. And he's so hot. Well,
they showed his wife in the audience, and she's very cute, too. But he's the hot one of the two of them. That's saying something, because she looks good. So then we got Best Director. The other nominees seem resigned to this choice. Martin McDonagh's been up for awards before, and I don't think he's ever won. No, he's never won an Oscar. He's won some Globes. But Banshees was a great film. I liked that a lot, too. If it had won, I would have been
It's
fine
his
with
best
that.
film.
Yeah, I think so, too.
Yeah.
Spielberg, of course, has won many times before, but it did seem more a matter of, unlike the Bassa thing and Kerry Condon and some other people where they feel like, yeah, okay. They all seem, the four of them, resigned, but also very happy for the Daniels to win. They dedicated it to their moms, and then Quan thanks everyone, basically. But they got to go up one more time when they won Best Picture, which was no surprise at that point. They'd won 6 already. You said Wang, right? So that is pronounced Wang in this movie? Waymond Wang and Evelyn Wang.
Oh, shoot, don't.
Is it Wang? I meant to look this up because I tried to
spelled
find...
with an A.
The producer's name is the same thing. It's W-A-N-G. And I tried to find the pronunciation for his last name, and I couldn't do it because when they do Best Picture at the end, it's just the names of the movies. So maybe it's Wang. I don't know, sorry, but Wang or Wong, we'll probably get this wrong.
I'm trying to picture Jamie Lee Curtis. Mrs. Wang! Mrs. Wang!
But then that could be a play on the fact that a white person would call them by...
Would mispronounce it.
Yeah, and the literal spelling. Anyway, so he's the producer. Another good-looking guy, by the way. And a good speech from him, and then the Daniels come up at the end. Everybody is so likable, and they're such underdogs. I said Rogers was making his second movie as the editor. The Daniels were making their second movie together, at least, as directors.
Yeah.
They made Swiss Army Man, and then this.
They caught lightning in a bottle.
Yes, they
This
did.
movie is so special. I 100% agree with the decision for them to win, even though it's such an unusual choice for the Academy. But I think they know they're not the kinds of guys, not just win Oscar,
Even get to go to the Oscars.
even get to go to the Oscars. But I read on Wikipedia, according to Wikipedia, this is the winningest movie of all time. It's won more awards across the board
I
than
believe
any
that.
other.
There's so many award shows, that's part of why.
Well,
but
that's
yes.
the thing. It's like it beat Lord of the Rings, but I'm like, I don't know. Did Lord of the Rings count all these extra award shows that are cropping up?
This had so many cast members winning as well, and that didn't.
No one's ever won all 4 cast awards,
No.
right? No.
This is the third time that 3 actors have won for one movie, but it's the first time that that's happened, and they also won Best Picture.
Incredible.
Because it was Streetcar and it was Network. Those two probably should have won Best Picture their years, too.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I love All the President's Men from 76, and Taxi Driver is great that year. I like Rocky a lot, that actually won. But I love Network. It's my favorite movie of that year. So
I would pick Network of those movies. Taxi Driver, you could certainly make an argument. My personal
But
favorite
this
is Network,
did
yeah.
what those didn't, which is it won all the big ones and also 3 acting awards. And look at the 3 people. We already talked about it. A guy who wasn't even in the business anymore. He did Temple of Doom. He did The Goonies next year, again Spielberg producing for Richard Donner. He did a few other movies in the next little while, but there wasn't much else.
I did find that his last film that he made 20 years ago, 2002, was called Second Time Around, and it was also about parallel universes.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So he's an assistant director. He did stunts, all that kind of stuff. But then, as he says in his speech, my Goonies brother for life, Jeff Cohen, helped him get the job. So he's Chunk in the Goonies.
And he's his agent.
Right.
Yeah. Both of the actors who won an Oscar that night had huge comeback stories. Very beloved actors
Oh,
that
the male
disappeared
actors,
for a
'cause
long
Brendan
time.
Fraser,
yeah, that's
yeah.
why I'm saying the male actors. Yeah. And then both of the female actors that won Oscars that night.
Genre filmmakers mostly.
And total Lifetime Achievement Awards.
Yes.
Although
Yeoh deserved it truly. I think Curtis was Life
100%.
Achievement.
Talk about how difficult these performances were. Every last one of them had to, in the same scene, without the camera even cutting away, turn into 1, 2, 3 different people,
Yep.
like right in front of the
And
camera.
make it clear to us.
And so clear. Stephanie Hsu brings so much charisma to the film that you cannot exaggerate. What an incredible villain.
One of the great modern villains.
Oh, truly. She just eats that roll up. It's amazing. And inside a single frame, she can look like 2 people at once. And she can go back and forth, and you always know who you're talking to.
As
Is
does
it
Quan.
Joy or is it Jobu?
Quan
And
is the other
absolutely.
version of himself, but also then just Waymond.
Oh, yeah, he's going back and forth crazy fast, and you always know who you're talking to. And again, with Michelle Yeoh, when you watch the movie for a second time and you see what she's like at the beginning, then you really see how much her character changes and how she performs that arc through all the craziness. The magic trick that it performs, I could spend the rest of my life trying to figure out how and why this movie works. But I think that the biggest strength it has, and the reason that it got so many people right in the heart, was that it has such a strong anchor of an emotional through line and an emotional arc for both Evelyn and Joy and Waymond. Well, Waymond is there waiting to be appreciated, I suppose. He doesn't have an arc, so to speak, but even Deirdre has an arc. Even she is kind of a different person by the end of the movie, just because of Evelyn coming around to her a little bit.
It's the same
opening
day.
her up. On the same day, yeah. So much stuff happens.
This is
in
a
that
day in the
one
life
day.
of.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. This whole movie takes place in one day. Oh my God. That's so funny to think. But yeah, it absolutely does.
She and Yeoh are hugging on the outside bench at the laundromat. And then you see, I think it's a montage, and they're laughing. I bet that was the actresses laughing about something that may have not even been in the script at all. It felt like that, because Yeoh and Curtis seem like they're not really acting. It's more just living the moment.
Yeah. Another thing that both of those actresses do that's very Oscar-friendly is they're playing ugly.
Well, especially Curtis, yeah.
Especially Curtis. I mean, Michelle Yeoh, she's wearing that dowdy outfit, and her hair's turned gray. And we see her looking like a babe later in the film when she's in the One Car Y section of the movie where she's a movie star. But Jamie Lee Curtis really turns it on, and the Oscars just adore it when an actress, not that Jamie Lee Curtis was ever, and especially lately, has she really been a glamorous actress. I read that's her real gut.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she did not wear a prosthetic gut. There's scenes where she's pushing it out, and you can tell she's being aggressive about it, and she's sitting, positioning herself to exaggerate it, certainly.
That's what I'm doing right now. I'm pushing it out.
You're pushing your gut out. Yeah,
it's
me too.
Bigger than it seems. Yeah, you too. Yeah. You can't see us. It doesn't matter. Go ahead.
Well, that's it.
You're right. That's one reason it won, because Hong Chow doesn't do that in The Whale. And Carrie Condon, I don't think she looks unattractive necessarily in Banshees. It's not a movie about attractive people, and she wasn't that well known. It's when a star does it. That's what it really comes down to.
Well, I mean, like Brendan Fraser had that huge transformation
right.
as well.
And also Clooney in Syriana, and we could go on and on and on.
Oh, yeah, there's a long history of the Oscars rewarding hot people for looking ugly.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're deep into the podcast now.
I know. I knew this was going to happen.
If you have opening thoughts, go ahead and say them now.
Okay, well, I think it's going to surprise anybody.
Opening.
When I say. Yeah. I love this movie. It felt like this chaotic joyride the first time I saw it, and now revisiting it, I was prepared for the onslaught of images and ideas, and I was that much more moved by the themes and that emotional through line. In this fantastical film, this ridiculously imaginative, way out there plot, the struggles of the characters are very relatable.
Yeah.
And I felt much more emotionally invested the second time I saw the movie. I think the first time you're just trying to hang on for dear life and like get through the movie, understanding what's happening and just letting it all in. But then when you know what to expect and you go back and rewatch it, it is incredibly rewarding. And I think I'll need to watch it a dozen more times to get to the bottom of how they managed to keep a leash on something so delightfully chaotic that it never devolved into nonsense.
I feel like the movie is going to get better with age and with multiple viewings, even though it is, and I read this online, well, I don't think it's this, but somebody said, is it a TikTok video for 2+ hours? There's elements of that. It's very busy. There's a lot going on, but you just hit on it. The family element is what obviously the Daniels were going for in the first place. It always comes back to especially the two women in the family, but Wayman's part of that too. If it weren't for that attachment, then maybe it wouldn't matter so much. The best movies do that, though. Yeah. They make it so that it's about a family or a team or friends that connect.
It's a small story, really. All this other stuff surrounding it, it's incredibly fun, entertaining, that you're invested in on its own right. But the story really comes down to Evelyn's connection with her family, especially her daughter. 5
actors that really matter. Yeoh, Hsu, Quan, Jamie Lee Curtis, of course, and then James Hong as Gong Gong. Mm-hmm. Michelle Yeoh's father in the film.
Everyone and the raccoon, of course.
Yeah. Oh, God, we'll get to the raccoon in a second, yeah. But the ones that really, truly matter, yes, you get Talia Medell, I guess it is.
As Becky.
Shut up, Becky! She's important. Jenny Slate, of course, too, and many other people. But those 5 people are the ones that matter the most, and really can even pare it down to the 3 main people in the family. And then because they incorporated her into the other universes, Deirdre, Jamie Lee Curtis's character, but really truly it's the 3 of them, and even more really truly it's the 2 of them. It's the mother and the daughter. So that's why this movie, with all the frenetic stuff going on and the busy stuff, and it's a TikTok video. I don't agree with that anyway. I can see why you might think it is, though, on the surface of it.
I have huge thoughts on that.
But it's also a matter of you make it matter, and they really did. Well, what are the thoughts then?
This movie isn't a TikTok movie. It is a movie made with TikTok in mind, though. I've seen this film described as one of the first true post-internet films because it's examining the way it feels to live online. This film, like social media, it moves with this whiplash speed between genres, tones. It enters mid-conversation, no context. It's a cat being clumsy. It's a makeup tutorial. It's a hydraulic press. It's a tornado. Social media, it's addictive and world expanding and entertaining, and eventually we have all reached that feeling of deadness when we've been scrolling for too long and suddenly absolutely nothing we're looking at has the ability to distract us anymore. Yet there is still seemingly this infinite amount of stuff to scroll through, and that bombardment
that's not seemingly.
Yeah, I know. And this bombardment of information can train our brain out of paying attention to the right things. It's not the first work of art to explore and get to the bottom of what this, I don't want to say the feeling's unique. I think just about all of us have experienced it at some point. Some of us experience it probably all the time, especially young people who truly grew up with the internet. I don't want to say their brains are broken. I don't want to be that guy. But their brains are probably different than our brains. We didn't grow up with the internet. I feel very seen by a film like this. Another great example of a piece of art that explores this is Bo Burnham's Inside. The song Welcome to the Internet, or That Funny Feeling. These are things that really strike a chord with me, and I'm 45 years old. So imagine what it feels like to be somebody the age of, what's her name, Elsie Fisher in 8th grade?
Yeah.
Because this can also reflect a generational divide, because the experience of someone Joy's age, who did grow up with the internet, would be vastly different from the experience of someone Evelyn's age. They say Joy showed this aptitude for jumping between multiverses, which is why she was plugged in way too much and her brain was broken. Evelyn learns the aptitude, but the whole process is extremely confusing to her at first. Trying to get her to understand the multiverse is like trying to teach my mom how to check an email on her freaking smartphone.
Waymond, the other version, the alpha Waymond, tells her to go into the janitor's closet, but she doesn't do that. It's one of those things like a sliding doors thing. If she went right into the janitor's closet, would it have been a different situation, except she gets yanked in there. Apparently an in-camera effect, by the way, when they did that. I didn't realize. I was reading online that's how they did that. That's impressive. But then she goes in there against her will, and then she's in two places at once. She's still sitting with Deirdre talking about taxes, but she's also in the closet with the other version of Waymond. By the way, it always throws me out to say Waymond, because it does seem like we're being racist. It's Raymond, but the stereotype of the way that Asian people would say it. But that is what it says online. It's Waymond. And also, she was supposed to be Michelle, because I guess they wrote this for her. But then she thought, no, I want it to be a separate character. I don't want to be Michelle Yeoh playing Michelle Wang, or Wong. I want to be Evelyn. Or I don't know if she came up with the name, but they changed the name to be Evelyn.
There's this outstanding video essay on YouTube called Multiverses, Nihilism, and How It Feels to Be Alive Right Now. It's on a channel called Like Stories of Old that really breaks down how stories like Everything Everywhere All at Once are accurately reflecting the way that the modern world has left us emotionally adrift. And he talks about how this is just such a great example of media that captures this unique and really hard to describe feeling of trying to find meaning in the world right now. It's uniquely hard, especially for younger people. And at the same time as having access to all the information in the world all the time, and all of the misinformation in the world all the time, can make it harder to make sense of our world. Our culture is kind of in this unique moment. We're less and less being told how to determine the meaning of our lives. Through most of human history, the culture would be handed to you. There wouldn't be any questioning. It would just be there, the blueprint. You follow it, everybody else follows it. There's really no debate to be had. But now we're expected to make our own way, which in many ways is incredibly liberating and
also terrifying.
Also terrifying.
So many choices.
Yeah, and
too many choices.
You already know this. I can really succumb to nihilism. I can completely relate to this feeling that
nothing matters.
Nothing matters. I'm also obsessed with space and the size of the universe. Try to wrap your head around how big the universe is. And then when you include the idea of multiverses, there's...
Alpha Waymond says that every decision makes a new universe.
Yeah.
So you and I deciding to do this podcast at 7:40 at night versus 7:30 at night is a new universe. That doesn't mean anything. How is that new universe? But that's what he's saying it means. It means that I was going to have a drink of water, but I put it off for 2 minutes. That's a new universe, but apparently it is.
So if you truly understand the concept of infinity, there's no limit to existence, then not only does that mean that there could be another version of you and I doing this podcast but 2 minutes later in the day, but there are actually infinite numbers of exactly you and I doing the podcast.
Doing this, wow.
At 2 minutes later.
Aim higher.
That's...
Ryan and Bev, sit on the porch with a drink.
Right now, not only is there another Ryan and Bev sitting sitting in a room just like this, having this precise conversation. But there are an infinite number of Ryans and Bevs. And every time we split off because we made one decision differently from another, there's still infinite numbers. That's just how big infinity is. It breaks your brain.
Yeah.
And you have to come to the understanding that what if life is meaningless? Then how do you find meaning in your life?
Well, we covered Armageddon at the start of the month. That's all about how if they don't stop this rock from coming to Earth, then everything on the planet dies. Every single living being, including bacteria, as Billy Bob says. But the planet doesn't die. It'll take a long time, but the planet will regenerate some kind of life. It might take, I guess, millions of years or even just thousands of years.
Those creatures that live at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, they would survive and then they would eventually recover.
But my point being that forget all life.
The Earth.
If the planet was a living thing, for example, it would be like me going on the side of my head, oh, that hurt, versus all of us are gone. So even in a movie like that, which is all about, this is everything, but to even just our little planet, never mind the whole universe, it isn't.
It's just the end of people, which we consider everything.
And you had a problem with that movie always being about just those characters. And I think it might have been a budgetary thing. It might have been the fact that the movie was already 2.5 hours long to show too much. They show Paris and Shanghai and some of New York being destroyed, but they don't focus too much on what's going on in the world, including Armageddon, where people are looting and hurting each other or going into bomb shelters. You see some of that in that movie, but for the most part, they focus on just the people we cared about in NASA and then on the asteroid. This movie, though, is about so many things. We just talked about infinite universes, but it's about, in the end, a disappointed mother and her daughter. And I love in the end, when she's finally trying to get through to her, she still insults her. Earlier, she said, "You're getting fat," which was really shitty to say to her. But then towards the end, when they're confronting each other outside the laundromat, she still insults her daughter, but then comes back to saying, "I still want to be here with you."
She just goes, "You are getting fat." I think that Joyce is a line to Becky that she insults me. It's her way of paying attention or a way of caring. In the last interaction we see between Evelyn and Becky, she's saying to Becky, "You need to fix your hair. Your hair is bad." This is her coming around to Becky. By insulting Becky's hair, she's welcoming her to the family because she cares that her hair looks nice. She
but
cares
such a key moment, though, is when she tells her father, Joy is a lesbian, and here's her girlfriend, Becky. This isn't just a friend, which has disappointed Joy so much earlier. This is her girlfriend. And it seems like Gong Gong accepts that.
And here's...
Which is a bit of a fantasy, by the way.
Oh, yeah, maybe. I mean...
Just like at the very end when they're going back to the tax office to see Gerger again, Joy seems happy with them, and it may be, a week later? Okay, they've come to an understanding, but she's just okay with everything now?
Well, is Joy aware of what's been going on? I'm a little confused.
That's the bigger question. Was any of this real? Is this woman just a schizophrenic?
Don't say that. It has to be real, Ryan. What are you talking about? There's no suggestion that she's crazy, other than all the events of the film, but I don't think there's any hint.
Well, the end is so key, because the very last shot is that close-up of Michelle Yeoh hearing the voices in her head, and then it seems like she quiets them for a minute, cut to black, show the credits, movie's over. But then I'll go to what happens next right now, since I said that. So what does happen next in Everything Everywhere All at Once? Evelyn ends up speaking to a psychiatrist frequently. And that's just a start. Because she might have gone way over the edge.
She's in the universe where she gets committed.
Yeah.
She's sent to Bedford and never seen or heard from again.
I do feel like what we see in this movie is supposed to be real, by the way. I'm not trying to say it's not. But it's always fun to speculate about that in movies that aren't fantastical, sci-fi. This movie is, and I think they tried to do this. I didn't realize they were really going for this, because I advertised this in one of the recent promos, at the end of a podcast, and said, it's a love story, and it's a drama, and it's a comedy, and sci-fi, and it's horror, and it's all these things. It probably covers every genre other than documentary.
Kung fu,
you
animation.
Could ask for. Yeah. And even reality, because we see Michelle Yeoh in that In the Mood for Love universe, which is what it is homaging. We wondered about that. It really is the universe where she and Waymond, where he's debonair, and they go to the movie premiere. That is supposed to be an In the Mood for Love thing. We covered that quite a few months ago. But we see a shot of Michelle Yeoh promoting Crazy Rich Asians. We see the name of that movie behind her. Yeah, with Michelle Yeoh looking at Michelle Yeoh on a red carpet. It's not subtle at all.
It's her actual universe. Yeah. It's the universe where she becomes Michelle Yeoh. I want to come back to what you were saying about her relationship with Joy. I mean, this is a key plot in the story. Emily St. James wrote this great article about this for Vox, where she said there's this trend emerging in films about relationships between parents and children that has reversed the standard formula where the child eventually grows up a little and comes around to understanding their flawed parents a little better.
Like in The Whale, which won the other Oscar this year.
Yeah, like in The Whale. The example that she used, which is a perfect one, is Lady Bird. A fraught relationship between a mother and daughter, but the climax of the film where we see they're going to be okay is when Lady Bird herself grows up a little, calls herself Christine, her given name instead of Lady Bird. She is meeting her mom where she's at, and that's the big emotional conclusion of the film. But Everything Everywhere All at Once, it's the opposite. It's mom that has to come around and say, you know what, I screwed up. And Emily St. James calls this the millennial parental apology fantasy. And she cites a few more examples, and the one that comes to mind is Turning Red, which I never saw, but you did.
Yeah.
And I know you didn't like it.
I like the concept.
A parent coming around and saying, actually, my kids are the ones that are right, and I'm the one that needs to change my behavior to better meet them where they are. And it's this new approach to the fraught relationship between parents and children.
And part of the problem with that, of course, is that you're saying to kids, whether they be 23, because that to me is a kid, and obviously to Michelle Yeoh even more so, that they get to dictate terms. And you see this so much in the last maybe 20 years or so, which is The Simpsons have parodied this. We talk about The Simpsons all the time. What do you want? Whatever that character's name is. Sebastian. This video game. Get 2. I'm not sharing with Caitlin.
Do you think that's what this movie is saying?
No,
this
movie's not.
She's becoming spoiled.
Our culture has done that.
Okay, fine. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who grew up with parents who were critical.
I get why that happens, though, in some ways.
Yeah, and I think
not every way, but some ways.
Okay. You and I kind of disagree on this, but I think if it's a fantasy, I mean, they're all fantasies. Maybe it's a fantasy that Lady Bird calls her mom and comes around too. But it's a lovely fantasy that a parent can also mature and also say to their kids, I'm responsible for the troubles in our relationship.
Well, and I don't know everything, too, because that's one thing that if somebody gets to be a certain age, even the age I am, and I guess you are too, the thing you know the best, if you're going to show maturity, you're not going to be Trump, which is, I've heard about this for 5 minutes, I'm a genius. It's going to be the opposite, which is, you and I know a lot about movies. I know a lot about baseball. But the older you get, the more you realize, I know nothing.
Yeah.
And of course you don't know nothing, but you don't know even 10% of what you thought you did 10 or 20 years ago.
And a little humility goes a long way in a difficult relationship. And as much as I can't personally relate to the specific struggles that Joy and Evelyn have, I still find this movie
there's some relation.
But okay, I struggle with my mom in some ways, although I think I've come around in the sense that I just have accepted she is the way she is.
You're also twice as old as Joy's character is in this.
True. When I was Joy's age, I had a completely different relationship with my mother, which in some ways may have been better, but in other ways was much worse. Yeah. I think I just appreciate that there's so many movies now that really explore the very fraught relationship between a mother and daughter. Father and son, Hollywood is no shortage of movies about fathers and sons and their fraught relationships.
The MCU.
Oh my God.
The other thing about multiverses the last little while, I guess maybe in some ways the Warner Brothers DCEU does it too, but the MCU with their multiverses. But so much of the last 15 years of MCU films have been about bad dads.
Every single Spielberg film is about a bad dad. Not Schindler's List, okay.
But many, many, many.
Including Fabelmans, which I saw many people say, the people that didn't like Everything Everywhere All at Once, because it has its haters, the Fabelmans was right there. That's the movie that deserved to win. I'm like, what movie did you watch? Absolutely
one of the great
not.
last shots of all time, but not a good movie.
So I really want to talk about what an unusual movie to win Best Picture. It's a comedy, that it's a sci-fi, that it does not have a primarily
Asian
white
people.
cast. Half the film is subtitles. There is a extended scene involving
dildos
butt
and
plugs. Yeah, dildos. Pixelated because I guess they just wanted to keep away from that NC-17 rating.
Makes it funnier.
All these things that make it such an underdog. But I was thinking about it and I was like, less so in recent years. So I took a look at the Best Picture winners from the last 10 years. And of the 10 films, only 2 of them are studio films. Can you guess what they are?
10 years, huh?
Yeah, you'll get one probably really easily.
Well, Coda's Amazon. You don't count that, I guess.
Proper film studio.
Yeah. I don't know the modern Oscars as much as I do the old
Okay,
Oscars.
so it's Green Book and The Shape of Water. They were made by DreamWorks and Fox. And it would be fair to argue that production companies like A24, who produced Everything Everywhere All at Once, also Moonlight, which won the Oscar 2017?
2016.
2016.
Well, it won 2017, but it's a 2016
right.
movie.
And Plan B, that won the Oscar for 12 Years a Slave and probably something else I'm forgetting. They're far from
Moonlight
underdogs.
also. They did Moonlight.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. So they're not underdogs, but they still are separate from the studios, and they have been filling the gap that studios left when they stopped making mid-budget films, especially anything that might be considered a risk.
This is a risk.
And this is such a huge risk. And I know people correctly lament that the studios don't back any film that doesn't have strong IP behind it, and no one can get mid-budget dramas made anymore. But people are out here making incredible, groundbreaking mid-level dramas and comedies and action films. They're just working outside the studio system. I think TV has also filled the gap a lot here.
Oh, yeah.
That's where those creators have gone and the audiences have gone too. The world has just changed in the way that we consume media. The movies have changed a little, and if you're keeping up with the times and you're watching modern movies,
very few of them are blockbusters.
Okay, fine. They're not going to blow up the way that they used to. Yeah.
20 years ago, that was what was winning more often than not. That was always the cliche, because it was something like Ben-Hur, that's a long time ago, obviously, and Gone with the Wind, even longer ago. But you look at, say, 20 years ago, or a little bit past that, I guess, even Titanic was the biggest movie of the year, wins Best Picture. Lord of the Rings was one of the biggest movies of 2003, wins Best Picture. $1 Million Baby, for its budget, was a huge hit, made over $100 million, wins Best Picture. But now you've got in the modern era something that does well, like this did, certainly did very well, especially for its budget. But no one saw this movie in the festival circuit or then in theaters and thought, that's going to win all the awards next year. No way. Parasite would have been the same, probably.
Oh, yeah. Same with Coda, Nomadland. People loved these movies, but these are movies that never would have even been on the radar 20 years ago.
The pandemic's part of that.
Something like, yeah, that's true. But The Fabelmans 100% would have been. Or All Quiet on the Western Front, which was
a great war film.
I did not like it, but the only true competition for EEAAO that night.
It won, I think, 4 awards, yeah. Let's get back to the plot of the movie then. So the opening shot shows the family joyfully singing karaoke. Well, I said joyfully. I didn't mean to play on words there with joy, but I think it's supposed to be a mirror shot or something, which is obviously an intentional moment too, which is that this is almost like it's not real. But it was real. They really did this. And then Evelyn's cooking for Gong's birthday and also the Chinese New Year and prepping their taxes. And of course that pays off later when the In the Mood for Love version of Wayman says, in another life, I would have been happy doing laundry and taxes with you, which is what the producer said to his wife when they won the Oscars, Jonathan Wang or Wong, whichever one that is. And it cuts to her and she has this, oh my God, it's so sweet. But of course that's what Quan says in the movie. And one of the big reasons why Quan is so important in this movie is because his character is the light. Obviously, Joy is unhappy in our real world. They all are, but she's very depressed because her mother doesn't care about her and is calling her fat and doesn't respect the fact she's a lesbian. And also probably part of the problem is, I'm guessing at least, that the lesbian girlfriend is not Asian or Chinese.
She says out loud.
Does she say that? Okay,
yeah, I think she says something, oh, she's white.
And she's got to worry about what her father's going to do. And her father was already disappointed with her for going to America with this guy who wasn't wealthy or what kind of future did they have. And they've done okay. They're talking about expanding this business. They're not doing that badly.
Yeah, they just didn't do their taxes properly.
Right.
They didn't do their taxes properly because she keeps claiming things on the business that are her hobbies that correspond.
Including karaoke.
Yeah, but they correspond to other universes where she discovers all the other different Evelyns that she could have been. Karaoke in another universe, Evelyn is a very famous, successful singer.
Right, of course, yeah, it does set us up that way. But Wayman is the optimist, and he's the one putting googly eyes on things in the laundromat, which real-world Evelyn doesn't like.
So I would love to take credit for this, but I read it. The googly eyes, white circle with a black center, is the yin-yang opposite
and then bagel.
Of the black bagel with the white center.
I read that too. That's a great touch too. I didn't pick up on that. And also during the awards speeches and the awards moments when you see Curtis and Yeoh often doing that circle on their forehead because that's such a key thing.
And they were wearing googly eyes on their lapels.
Oh, were
they?
I didn't notice.
I think somebody was. Speaking of the everything bagel, Quan said that the everything bagel did 2 things. It allowed us to, 1, talk about nihilism without being too eye-rolly, as he said, and it created a MacGuffin. He's called it a doomsday device. He says, in the first half of the movie, people think that the bagel is here to destroy the world, and in the second half you realize it's a depressed person trying to destroy themselves. It just takes everything about action movies and turns it into something more personal.
And what fixes everything in the end is a group hug.
Yeah.
Trying to pull her
kindness, be kind.
Hugging from behind. Don't go in there type hug, but still, it is a hug.
Some people have criticized this for being a little too, I guess, cloying. oh, the answer was love all along, but that is the answer to nihilism and depression, to finding meaning in a meaningless world. You have to start focusing on the micro instead of the macro. You have to stop looking to the universe and start looking across the table at the person who loves you, at the dog licking your feet, at the bus driver that you share a smile with, at any of those things, any of those connections. That's where meaning lies.
Stranger Than Fiction gets into that too. One of the things I love about that movie is at the end you see the montage of this old dude eating a bagel or something in Maggie Gyllenhaal's bakery. Big smile on his face. He's really happy. Tony Hale has done some great things in his career, obviously Arrested Development and Veep especially. But I think the best moment he's ever had in his life is in that movie when he opens up the space camp thing that Will Ferrell has sent to him. It's about the little moments. Life is big moments, yeah, sometimes, but really life is the small moments, and I think this movie is getting at it. This movie is about so many huge moments, but in the end it comes down to, and it is cliche, but we talked about Green Book. We didn't love that movie, but I have watched the end of that movie on YouTube many times in the past 5 years, and I do love it when Mahershala Ali comes over to Viggo's house for dinner. The very end of that movie touches me so much. For all that movie's faults, it does come down to acceptance and friendship. The movie says that these two real guys became friends. We have a lot of problems with that movie winning Best Picture, but it did win us over because of things like that.
I said it then, I'll say it now. I hate that movie, but it was extraordinarily well made.
Shape of Water is very flawed, has a very good ending. Maybe even a great ending.
Another movie I cannot get behind.
I'm not a big fan of either, but I like the ending a lot.
Yeah.
And this has a very good ending, especially with the whole thing. But I do love you and all that. Evelyn says that to Joy in the real world. By the way, this is very much, and they acknowledge this, a Matrix, not ripoff, but an homage in many ways.
Doesn't Quan say in his Oscar speech, he says, it started with the idea, the Matrix, but Neo is my mom.
Oh, if he said that, I didn't hear that. I just watched the speeches last night.
Somewhere.
May have been somewhere else. They accepted a lot of awards earlier this year.
Yes.
May have been the Producers Guild. It may have been the Golden Globes. A big thing we can't overlook, of course, are the fight scenes. Ke Huy Quan has one big one, and he's outstanding in that. He was a stunt coordinator, so he knows what he's doing there. He eats the lip balm, which is a strange touch. Apparently that was just chocolate or something they made to look like lip balm. And then he attacks the guards, and we see all the martial arts going on. All the actors at some point, I guess maybe not so much Jamie Lee Curtis, but the major cast members get to do this kind of stuff. Yeoh's very experienced. The one time we've covered her before, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Tomorrow Never Dies, one of the best Bond girls of all time. Best Bond women of all time. But what about the fight scenes? They're pretty awesome too. And it does, of course, reference The Matrix.
Totally agree. Not only are they well choreographed, but they're just so much fun. They're so silly and irreverent. I read that the fanny pack scene, they shot in just a day and a half. You can believe it. It's such a coordinated scene. There's so much going on. The first big proper fight sequence, you think it would be hard to pull that off with a fanny pack.
Yeah. But then getting back to the everything is about love in the end, if it's not going to be about nothing, it's going to be about love. That's what she does. She fights all these henchmen of Jobu Tupaki with love. But it's also about being silly. This movie gets funnier. Probably more in the middle section. It doesn't literally get funnier as it goes along because you get a lot of plot stuff to resolve in the last maybe 30 or 40 minutes. The middle section is so funny, and it's also somewhat funny in the last bit. It's not as funny in the first bit. And we haven't even talked about it. I guess maybe this is the time for it. Rakakuni. The fact that she mispronounces that and that becomes a whole thing in the other universe, and then that guy has a Rakakuni on his head. Voiced, by the way, by Randy Newman, the composer.
My favorite is that when they're chasing Rakakuni as he's being taken away by the Humane Society or something, she's on his head, puppeting him, and then something happens and they can't do it anymore, and she's like, get on my shoulders, and he puppets her. They could just chase after the truck individually, but it's so
they're a team.
Silly, but wonderful. Silly with like the biggest, most generous heart. The movie is so imaginative, but in its soul, it's so kind. Another thing with the Oscar speeches that people said over and over, I remember the editor specifically talking about this, but it seemed like everybody parroted it, was that this was actually the nicest, warmest set to work on, and that everybody was happy and they were kind. And you can't deny that that attitude came through with this incredibly generous spirit of imagination and creativity. That silliness comes from such a happy place, and you can tell.
Yeah. The contrast, though, is that one of the things that Wayman's got going on in the real world is that he is threatening divorce, but just as a wake-up call. to try to get through to Evelyn, and obviously they don't get divorced by the end of the film.
Evelyn, Joy, Wayman, they're split apart by the different universes over and over again, but it starts with Evelyn's attention being split between the demands of her taxes, the laundromat, the party, her daughter, her father, her husband. So much so that she can't give adequate attention to anything.
Hang on, and there's one thing about this that really rides over everything, is a part of her, a big part of her, which we learned through the whole film, that wants none of this. The things you just said, she wants none of those things.
Yeah. And she thinks of the regrets of all the things she didn't do. Well, we haven't really talked about this theme very much, that when she gets to explore these different universes, she gets to see the different Evelyns that she could have been. And this is something that could have made her very despondent. Oh my God, if I'd made different choices, I could be a movie star. I could be a famous scientist.
I could be a lesbian with weird fingers.
I could be a lesbian with hot dog fingers. I could be the person that twirls the pizza sign. There's all these universes where she's happier, where she's more successful. And they say to her, the reason she has a superpower is that she's the failingest Evelyn. She's the worst possible.
Jobu wants her to justify what Jobu's trying to do to end it all.
Right.
We will die if we go into this bagel together.
Yeah, and you will get this because your life is so awful.
It really isn't that awful.
You can see how somebody who could have had higher expectations for her life in one way or another, her life isn't that awful. You say that her husband is serving her divorce papers. Her father is critical. She has a very fraught relationship with him. Her business might be doing all right, but she's getting audited, and she could very easily lose her business. She's losing her daughter, and she can't understand why.
She could be a rock. Another great funny sequence.
Love The Rock. The magic is that it's so frenetic and so wild and so overwhelming. And then this huge breath. Joy and Evelyn get a breath, but the audience gets a breath. And it's so quiet. They don't even have voices. They just use text. Yeah. And there's that wide shot with the two rocks, and they're laughing, and it just says, ha, 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 ha. I died laughing. It is such a refreshing and hysterical and, again, imaginative moment.
You could see Yeoh and Hsu actually sitting there doing this, too, if you really use your imagination.
Cinema is magic, people.
Apparently when they shot that, too, it was so hot. They were dying. The filmmakers, there were no actors there. Didn't need to be. Yeah. But the directors and the filmmakers, yeah.
But they must have gotten through that day pretty quickly, because what is there to it? I guess you have to get the rocks to move. You have to do the special effect of them moving on their own.
The googly eyes are on the rock, too.
Yeah. I just want to come back, you interrupted me there, to the split apart theme. On top of splitting between universes and Evelyn's attention being split, there's also the theme of the immigrant struggle. So Joy is split between identities. She's Asian, she's American, and she's a lesbian. It's common enough for first-generation children of immigrants to feel ungrounded in their identity, but further exacerbated by the fact that she's LGBTQ. This is not something you and I can relate to at all, but there's been a huge response from people who are children of immigrants who understand.
I'm pretty L. Wait, is that the right one? No, it's not right. Am I Q? Am I IA? So many letters in there.
You're S for stay out of it, Ryan.
Live and let live, as I like to try to say.
There you go. You're L.
Leave them alone.
Live and let live, and let it go. Anyway, the future is here.
Go ahead, you were saying.
This is not something you and I can relate to, but I know that a lot of people have really felt seen by the story of the struggling immigrant and the story of the struggling child of the immigrant that just can't bridge those two worlds. We have friends whose parents are immigrants who talk about how there is a real divide between them and their parents. They just grew up in such different places.
And they're white.
Language barriers. Yes, a friend of ours whose parents are from Poland, don't speak very good English. She's talked about how it really does put a barrier between her and them. And it's a struggle. That's probably just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much going on there.
I think it's Quan says in the Oscar speech that he was, or maybe it's, well, there's two Quans, Ke Quan and Daniel Quan. Which one is it now? I watched so many speeches last night. But one of them talks about being, must be Ke Quan, I guess, being on a ship as a refugee.
Yeah, he's from Vietnam. First Vietnamese person to win an Oscar ever, or an acting Oscar?
Whatever, is he Cambodian maybe? Because he was basically playing himself in The Killing Fields, but won a supporting actor Oscar, same category. Michelle Yeoh is the first Asian American woman to ever win Best Actress, because Merle Oberon won a long time ago, and she technically is from Asia, but she never identified as that. When we think Asia, I think she might have been Russian more descent. I don't know. But she's from there. But Michelle Yeoh, obviously, we know this. She's been doing this forever. She had such a career before this. She and Curtis have had two of the better careers. That's the funny thing about this, an independent film, and you think, no big stars. Okay, Jamie Lee Curtis is a pretty big star, but so is Michelle Yeoh.
And Michelle Yeoh is like famous here, but she's a legend in China. She is Malaysian, but she's of Chinese descent, I think. But
that
she
sounds
was
right,
born and bred in, or at least raised in Malaysia. I can't remember exactly how that works out. But she is a huge star over there.
Frances McDormand's whole inclusion rider thing, which she won for 3 Billboards many years ago. Case in point, this movie right here, Inclusion Rider. The main characters, 3 of them are women. The 4th one is an Asian man. Regardless of awards and big Oscars success and big box office and all that kind of stuff and respect, just the fact it got made, that alone is a big win.
How many years ago do you think a studio would have looked at this script and said, we love it. Can you make them Italian families instead? Can you make them a white immigrant family instead? I'm serious. I bet 10 years ago, no studio would have made this with Asian leads. Sure, you can make it an immigrant story, but they have to be immigrants.
Gotta be the Corleones.
From Ukraine or something. Yeah, they have to be white.
Michael's gotta be the one doing the Texas. Oh, not so powerful anymore. Getting audited. Oh.
All right, I know we're deep in it, and we're probably going to wrap up soon. But before we do, I have to give a shout out to the references to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in this movie, because I grew up reading those books and listening to the radio show. So Debbie, the dog mom, the Jenny Slate character, her ticket number is 42. And that's very early in the film, and it's definitely a signal to my hive.
She's a Jackie Robinson fan?
No. That's incorrect, actually. The number is only and forever associated with Hitchhiker's Guide, because the number 42 famously is the answer to life, the universe, and everything. But Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, there's a spaceship in that movie runs on something called the infinite improbability drive, where instead of controlling velocity, it controls improbability. And while the ship is reaching the improbability that it will arrive at its desired destination instantly, all sorts of other bizarre and improbable things also happen. It's an homage to that theory, whatever that way of working. The way that they travel between universes is to create these improbable situations that would recreate the improbability that they would jump to this other multiverse.
It's not like it's been done badly by Marvel, but maybe they've just burned us out. They still have dozens, hundreds, maybe even thousands of characters we haven't met yet, including redoing the Fantastic Four and the X-Men in their version because they were done before Disney owned them. But maybe we're burned out on this, and we've had so many of these multiverse movies in the last couple of years. But here's a movie that comes out right at the peak of all of this, because the MCU does 5 things a year, including Disney Plus, maybe even 6 things a year with all the movies, and almost all of them are about this multiverse stuff. Here's one movie that no one knew was coming that ends up getting all this acclaim and success and awards and everything like that, and makes it work far better than most of the movies have. Maybe the Spider-Man No Way Home movie was the best of all those. It probably was actually the best of all those.
I agree.
But when it comes to the multiverse stuff, which is better, this or that? Probably this.
Oh, this is definitely better. So you have a movie like Everything Everywhere All at Once, or another great example that you didn't mention is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse. Yeah. These are movies that are using the idea of the multiverse to express a theme. The Marvelverse is using the multiverse to resuscitate dead characters, to find different restarts for characters that they want to explore, rather than introducing new IP to people or finding new adventures and stories for the characters that we already know and love that have strong IP. They're using it as a narrative device and just a way to work around the problem that they have made. How many movies now? Honestly, 30? Where are we at?
Maybe that.
I hope they've been watching Rick and Morty, which is another thing that started off using the multiverse to great effect, with incredible imagination, creating a world that none of us have seen before.
But it's hard to care because they've killed them off.
But it's impossible to care. The first few seasons are so great, and now I do not care. Of course, it still can be funny, not as funny as it used to be, but the conceit of the multiverse has made it exhausting.
But in a one-off like this, because they don't need to sequelize this, they probably will try to. Maybe A24 is going to rise above that because they are still a niche studio. They're a studio, but they're not...
Has A24 ever made a sequel?
Oh, probably.
Oh, the horror films, probably.
Yeah. I can't see them making a sequel to this, but maybe they'll try to because everyone tries to sequelize everything. You probably could. The movie ends with this notion that it's not over. The fact that she's still hearing voices in her head, whether she shuts them down for a minute or not. Because look where the movie ends. They're back in the tax office with Deirdre, one of the most boring things anyone could ever do in the history of their life. Well, they do take the grandfather, don't they? All 4 of them go, that's right. So the 5 main characters are all in the very last scene. And we see the close-up of Yeoh hearing the voices and then bing. But I think this movie is suggesting there's far more to come. So
well,
they might
she has a
sequelize
superpower, essentially, at the end of the film.
If what
Although,
we saw
does
was...
she doesn't have the superpower, she doesn't have the ear things.
I guess that's true, yeah. So Michelle Yeoh was in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Crazy Rich Asians. We'll probably do that sometime later this year because you got an entirely, I think, certainly mostly Asian cast, Asian director and all that. Quan, we haven't covered him before, but he was in The Temple of Doom and The Goonies, but then not much else since. But what a performance, and truly deserved the Oscar, not just because he's the comeback story. Stephanie Hsu, she did Shang-Chi with Yeoh. And apparently this was supposed to be the character played by Awkwafina, who's also in Shang-Chi.
That's right. Yeah, she was originally cast. I like Awkwafina fine, but
I don't think she could do...
I can't picture anybody
Stephanie
else in this
Hsu,
part.
I don't think that Awkwafina could do anything close to this. Jamie Lee Curtis, our second movie ever covering A Fish Called Wanda, was the first, where she's very funny with that hilarious cast. I'm probably going to do Halloween in October by myself because you're not a fan, but it is a classic, and it is 45 years old this year. Yeah, 45 years old. And don't sleep on her work in True Lies also, where she's so funny with Arnold. They're a great team. I haven't seen that in a long time. Probably should. James Hong, who does play Gong Gong, has 450 plus credits, according to the IMDb. A lot of it's voiceover work. He's 94 and still working. He was there at the Oscars, and he got to go on stage with everybody else. But does a lot of voiceover work. He's the father of Po, I think is the character's name. Jack Black's character, the panda in Kung Fu Panda. Speaking of voiceovers, Jenny Slate, who's in this movie as Debbie the dog mom. Apparently it was Debbie Big Nose or something like that, because that is what Michelle Yeoh calls her. But then they thought, we can't further that Jewish stereotype. She was perfect. I mean, literally perfect as the voice of Marcel in Marcel the Shell with Shoes On last year.
Loved that
One of
movie.
my favorite voiceover performances I've ever heard. I don't think I would have recognized it as Jenny Slate doing that. She's done a lot of work. She's done a ton of things and some good stuff, but I think that might be the best thing she's ever done. And she's pretty fun in this, too. With the dog, the Pomeranian, right?
You have to ask? You have to ask if that's a Pomeranian? You know.
I'm lost. We're in all these multiverses. I'm lost.
We had a Pomeranian. If you ever hear us talk about our old...
Fox!
Rest in peace, Fox. He was a Pomeranian. He was even more handsome than...
way more.
Was the dog's name Johnny?
Oh, I
in
don't
the
know.
movie. I would remember the dog's name.
Tally Medell, I guess, plays Becky. Shut up, Becky. She's done mostly shorts and TV shows. I already said before that Quan and Scheinert only have done Swiss Army Man before this, which I thought was fine, but I didn't love it the way a lot of other people did. The joke seemed like it was a little bit played after maybe 40 minutes.
They also made one of the greatest music videos of
Big
all
music
time.
video people, yeah.
Have you seen it?
No, I just know they did a lot of music videos before this, and before Swiss Army Man.
I'm going to send it to you. We're going to watch it together. Turn Down for What? I actually watched it today just because I kept thinking about it. I was like, I've got to see that thing again. It's amazing.
Well, Scheinert also directed The Death of Dick Long, which Paul Rogers edited. That was the only movie he edited before this, although he did work on David Arquette's wrestling documentary, so I guess he's not including that. He says it's my second movie ever editing, because I think that came out, I'm pretty sure it did, before this, so that would be his third, but that was a documentary, so anyway. But Scheinert worked on his own once. These two guys, I assume, will work together again. They seem to be collaborators generally. Jonathan Wang also worked on music videos and shorts, and then did produce their movie Swiss Army Man. Michelle Yeoh was an executive producer, and so were the Russo brothers. So Anthony and Joe, is it? From the MCU.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. I wonder how much they
But
had
their
to do with
background's in
it.
comedy. Maybe that's why. And also the MCU with the multiverse.
Yeah, their MCU movies are among the best MCU movies there are. They did Captain America films, and
The two Avengers.
They're incredible action directors. I think the best in the MCU.
I don't remember noticing this in the big screen because we saw this in the theater. Yeah, we did see it in the theater last spring, I guess it was, but we watched this time on Prime. The changing aspect ratio from 2:3:5 to 1, 25 to 1 to 4:3, depending on the storyline, and I guess in some cases on where they are in the multiverse as well. You are risking the audience going, I don't like that. I remember a friend of mine was dwelling on that with the Dark Knight Blu-ray because it was the IMAX, which filled the 1:8:5 to 1 TV screen, but then most of the movie was 2:3:5 to 1, and he called me and said, I don't like this. Why are you watching the black? Watch the image. I noticed it with this movie. We literally see it go, but I didn't care. I think that was part of the point of this movie. You do that with some drama, that would be very noticeable and probably stupid.
When they go between the different universes, they're homaging different director styles.
Sure, yeah.
2001 homage in the hot dog universe.
Of course.
They're not being coy.
Scheinert plays a character in this movie. He's the bondage guy, but he's also apparently one of the apes.
Oh,
in
yeah.
The ape sequence from 2001. Larkin Seiple, 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 whatever, also shot Swiss Army Man and all 10 episodes of Beef on Netflix, which we just finished watching, the Ali Wong and Stephen Yeun show, which maybe gets better as it goes along. Really good show. So
We
shot
really
all those.
loved it.
Yeah. Son Lux, who was nominated for this, he's new to film scores, but he played instruments on Looper. If it's not his first score, it's one of his first scores anyway, and I think it's a pretty good score. By the way, the visual effects team, including the Daniels, taught themselves via online course how to do this stuff.
Get out. Well, they were all working during the pandemic.
Right.
They wrapped shooting mid-March 2020, if you can even imagine. So they had great timing that they finished the shoot right before the pandemic really shut everything down. And then you have the whole post-production team working on this movie with nothing else to do.
Yeah.
Not everybody was productive during the pandemic, but some people turned to work. I tended to do that I started a whole side hustle because I had too much nervous energy and I needed something to do. And I can imagine these creative people just putting their whole heart and soul into every single frame of this film, because if they don't do it, what are they going to do? They're going to go watch Friends again?
Well, also they want a career, and they were mostly nobodies, and look what they came up with.
Yeah, no kidding.
Teaching themselves. I mentioned what happens next already, and that is that Evelyn ends up speaking to a psychiatrist. This movie does have a lot of interpretations, though, and you could say none of this happened and it was all in her head. Whatever it was, though, it convinced her to be better to her daughter and to her husband. I think that divorce must be rescinded. Well, it's supposed to have been about a week when they go back to see Deirdre again. So I guess he pulled the divorce. He even says to her during one of the sequences, it was a wake-up call. So I guess she got the wake-up call.
Yeah, he just wanted her attention, and it worked.
Yeah. Okay, then a long episode, but not surprisingly, on Everything Everywhere All at Once, the big Oscar winner from many months ago. A really good film. If I had to vote, I think I would have gone with this. I like Banshees a lot, but this was a good choice. And I'm with the people in the Oscars crowd that seem to be so legit happy for this, like the Parasite thing. But again, people give standing ovations to everything these days. Coda got that big standing ovation, and we're sitting there thinking, we're not surprised at one, but really, this movie is your best movie of the year? This may have been, and we can't really say that about Green Book, The Shape of Water, or Coda, if we were the ones picking. But if we were, this would have been at least in the short list, if not number one.
I might have voted for Tar.
Oh, Tar was great, too.
My personal opinion was really torn between those two.
I'd rather watch this again, though.
100% I'd rather. I think Tar is certainly a much more polished movie, and it's so interesting in its own right. A great film. I'll
Good for
definitely
Todd Field.
again.
Hasn't made many movies, but he's hit a home run every time. Well,
Yes.
I don't like Little Children that much, but it was interesting. It was a solidly made film.
But this movie is not just the fun movie, the one that once it got momentum in the award circuit, it just really turned into a snowball that couldn't be stopped. But I think it is representing the future. I really thought that about, say, something like City of God, which instead was just representing a very specific time and place. When we went back and watched that movie, it actually seemed pretty dated, even though it felt like the future at the time. But it really was great to have my positive first impressions of this film be confirmed. I really think it's going to be a classic, and probably a very influential film. I still just can't believe that a movie with an extended action sequence featuring fighters with dildos and butt plugs sticking out of their asses won the Oscar for Best Picture. It's astounding. This is the future I want.
Yeah. Also, by the way, there's that fun moment where Evelyn seems to die, and then we see the credits, but that's in the Mood for Love universe.
So cool.
Because they're watching this movie in a way, in a little meta moment way there, too. It's a little too much at times, a little too gimmicky, but that's not really a negative exactly if you make it work, and this movie made it work. It's so much deeper than just the gimmicks, especially when it matters the most. This movie has real heart. I cared about all the main characters, especially the three Wangs, the family. So yeah, it's showy, maybe a little too long. It's well over 2 hours. But I think I might like this one even more as the years go on.
It's always going to have that really authentic and moving emotional through line.
That's true. Okay, that was Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, EEAAO. In 7 days, we'll be continuing unofficial Oscar month Redux. We did that back in March. Well, on July 17th, 24th, and 31st, well, this is 17th, but anyway, we're talking about movies that won acting Oscars, 3 today, and of course, today's film won Best Picture, too. On the 24th, we'll take a look at another Gus Van Sant joint, which won an acting Oscar. We've covered a couple of his funny movies, To Die For and Good Will Hunting. Now it's time to get all serious on you as we jaw about Milk, which is one of my very favorite movies of that year, and I think the best of the Best Picture nominees, and maybe should have won. The Coming Attractions opinion question for Milk. The majority of Best Actor Oscar winners, well, the Oscars again, since the turn of the century are characters based on real people. I counted 14 of the 23 so far. Was the best you've seen of those 14 guys Phil Hoffman in Capote, Forrest Whitaker in The Last King of Scotland, Colin Firth in The King's Speech, Jamie Foxx in Ray, or someone else? Or was it Sean Penn doing some of his very best work as Harvey Milk?
So for our answers to that question, check out next week's podcast about Milk. You obviously already know how to find us, but let me remind you to favorite or subscribe wherever you listen, which is also where you can find our archive of hundreds of episodes that are available for free. We're both on Twitter. I'm at Bev Ellis, and Ryan is at MovieFiend51. Or you can reach us by email, haveyouveurseenpodcast@gmail.com. And you can also find our podcast on YouTube at HYES Ellis. And to enjoy freshly roasted premium coffee delivered straight to you in Canada or the US, please go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES and enjoy a 20% discount.
As long as this was, I know we missed a lot of things, but this is the kind of movie where that happens. So to end, I'll say, it's time to go be a couple of rocks sitting on the edge of a mountaintop, and we'll see if I'm capable of shutting up and just being a rock.
Ha 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 ha.
Ha 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 ha.
And cut.